Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
Happy New Year, you guys. Here we are, 2023. How are the holidays? What's your outlook on the new year? Give it to me. What do you got? Sarah,
Resolutions.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh my
got a
gosh,
lot of
I
changing
have
to do.
answers to all those, even a resolution. So thank you for asking. Yes, This is my
Okay.
first year to do a resolution.
Lay it on us.
I did not think I would have another happy Christmas after we lost mom and dad. And I thought if I did, it would be when I had grandkids. Like I was like, it's not going to be anytime soon. And I had such a wonderful Christmas. It was just, even before we went to Disney, it was really, really special and happy and like just so grounding. So thank God, praise God for that. I mean, that's been huge. I definitely feel like a weight has kind of, more grief has lifted, and I think that's made a big difference. Like just kind of in the past probably 2 months. So that has just been incredible. But my resolution, so I don't know how open I was about this, but some people turn to pills when they go through horrible things. Some people turn to the bottle. I went to Madewell, the store that you can buy cute clothes, and I bought like everything that they made in my size.
Wow.
Yeah, and Madewell was my coping mechanism for a while, as were other places. Frank and Eileen, I see you, girl. I spent a lot of money.
Retail therapy, as they say.
Which everyone will say, like, oh, it's so much better than, a substance. And it is, but it still costs things. So my New Year's resolution is I'm not allowed to buy any clothes all year.
All year? A whole year?
All year. Y'all,
Wow.
I have so many clothes. Like, I really have to take a step back. So,
Well, now that you've said it to however many people are listening,
I'm held to it.
Sarah, you're held
I'm
to
held
it.
to it. Yeah.
Or you'll just be made
When you
fun of
see
incessantly every
Sarah
time.
in Aeropostale, rebuke her.
Yeah. I mean,
Now,
for
Sarah,
so many reasons.
That looks like this season. I don't know what.
Right.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
That's why it's been kind of freeing. I went in Anthropologie, which I love to spend money on, and their clothes are very expensive. A couple weeks ago, and I had this sense of freedom that I literally just didn't have to look at anything.
There you go.
So
Freedom.
we'll see.
The enabling
Sarah,
word.
Before we hear from the Reverend Heyman, what's the hot take on Disney? What do people need to avoid? Tell us what I'm supposed to be
Dave,
going there in a few
I
months.
Say this,
Tell me.
and I say this knowing that you've done Disney when the kids were younger as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm almost likely going to do it. My youngest has never been, and he's 7, and he's obsessed.
Okay.
So,
because I remember a video of you dancing, pushing a stroller into Magic Kingdom. Yes. I thought of that.
it was joy. That was a total joy moment. Yeah.
So my read on Disney is you're a psycho if you got a kid that's young enough to be in a stroller. If you're going to Disney, no offense, Dave. I think you're a total psycho. And I think if you bring a baby to Disney, CPS should come do a clean sweep and take the infant from you because you're not a fit parent.
No, the
So
kid who
that's
was
my-
in Sarah, the kid who was in that stroller, our second child, it was the most epic meltdown of, I think, all 3 of our children I've never experienced.
Perhaps of all
full
time.
body spasms, scratching my face as we were trying to leave. It was, I sign on to what you're saying.
No, it's like at 4 p.m., it becomes like the Hunger Games. You know what I mean? Like it just gets really, it's like Purge. It's worse than that. Like at 4 p.m., all the families turn on each other at Disney, no matter where you are.
We had this experience where we were trying to get out of Main Street, USA, and there was like a dance party that was trapping us in there.
Oh my God, I love that.
And so it was this unbelievably upbeat song. It was like a Katy Perry type song, and all these, everyone's dancing, and it's the choreographed stuff. And I have a 2-year-old who's clawing my eyes out because you cannot get away from the stores. And Kate my wife always says, that was That was the low point. Like, I don't think it was hell to that upbeat, to be trapped and people crushing
literally
in on you.
Trapped by choreography. I mean, that's just...
Well, hey, Mr. Heyman, I saw a picture of your church on Epiphany Sunday, jam-packed, RJ baptizing the entire world and doing...
It was 7, right?
Looks like he's doing his job.
Yeah.
That's amazing, RJ.
It was
not emptying the church, after all.
It was not yet, not this coming Sunday, maybe. But yeah, we had over.
I was so happy.
We had well over 400 people in worship on Sunday, which longtime members said it was easily the largest sort of regular Sunday we've had in decades.
That's so great.
So really encouraging. And like our men's group this morning was standing room only, so we got to like move to a different room, and things are really pretty good right now. Things are kind of popping. Had a great Christmas and just really laid low. Did not do Disney World after Christmas.
Well.
Josh is a saint. I'm not that good of a person. So we just stayed home and watched movies. It was actually cold in Florida for a few days, cold and wet and rainy, which was lovely because we stayed in our pajamas and watched movies. And then when it got nice, we went to the beach. And I played some tennis and laid low, and it was really great. So I'm pretty encouraged right now and looking forward to a good 2023. So that's the Heyman report.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there was nothing at all happened in my life over the break. It was very boring. I'm just kidding. My older brother, who some people know from the Brothers Zoll podcast, John, got married and to Sarah Beth Turner, the most wonderful person, and that happened in New York City on the 30th, and I'm sad you guys couldn't come, but it was
Me too.
It was truly just a joyful, redemptive, fun, quirky. It was, for me, it involved wrangling my 3 boys into all sorts of like fancy clothes that they.
It was very fancy.
I saw that.
Do not like
very AC. It was very AC/DC.
Oh my gosh! I mean, she ordered outfits from Spain, like page boy outfits from Spain, and I was just worried. I was worried my kids weren't actually going to fit into them, but it all worked out. Jacob Smith was the officiant. It was a wonderful time. It was a lot of travel. It was definitely one of those need a vacation from your vacation. But to watch this happen for John and after it was, and my new sister-in-law is just phenomenal and.
She's an Ole Miss girl. I mean, what more could you want?
Girl.
What more could you want?
It's been and then to take the boys through.
There might be a God. There might be a God who actually is on our side at least some of the time.
And he sends Ole Miss girls.
Well, actually, in fact, the guy who preached, a wonderful guy named David Kim, preached, and he said, if you ever need sort of proof of God's love and God's existence, but also God's love, just look at one another. Because it's that miraculous of a kind of
it is.
set of circumstances, and so that was us, and now we're back. And Sarah, you sent us the funniest video. I loved it. Stephen Colbert. He was interviewing Quinta Brunson, who's from Abbott Elementary, and who's really the
creator and director and everything of Abbott Elementary. Yeah.
And she just, they've done extreme. It was a very good year for anyone involved with that show. The Golden Globes. They just
have y'all watched this show before?
I have not gotten there, but
you have to watch it because neither of you really went to real public school, and it's so deeply familiar to me as a kid who went to real public school. So
really.
You gotta watch it, yeah.
Well, he's speaking with her, and she's dressed to the nines, and she looks amazing. And he says, 2022 was a big year for you. You won an Emmy. You were named one of Time's 100 most influential people, one of People Magazine's People of the Year. Do you feel the need to one-up that? And she responds immediately. She says, I want to one-down it. I want to rest. Last year was such an incredible year for everyone, for myself, for my show, for my family, for my friends. And I love sleep. Today, I slept before I came here. I took a nap. I'm normally not a napper, but I did one today. I did it for 30 minutes. Woke up feeling recharged and renewed. So I kind of want to get into naps this year. That's my goal. See what naps can do. And we just released that amazing sleep issue of the magazine, and we highlighted the nap ministry, which I think we talked about ages ago on the Mocking Cast. But sort of naps as resistance, naps as grace, naps as sort of just reclaiming the human being versus the human doing. But Sarah, tell me why you liked this video so much that you sent it to us.
I loved the quick response of like, I'm gonna wind down. And I know that she is incredibly accomplished in ways that none of us will be. But to me, the winding down just hits this note that's so familiar to me of like, who's in front of me that I've been given to love and take care of versus like, what are all the like accomplishments that I'm gonna, in whatever professional capacity I'm in. And that, that plagues church workers just as much as it plagues clergy as much as it plagues anybody else. What if it's this year is not me trying to, lay out some arduous pyramids that I've got to climb, and what if instead it's these people in front of me that I've been given to love? And so I kind of heard that in her talking, because she did talk about, it was interesting. It wasn't just I'm tired. It's my friends are tired. My family is tired. The people I work with are tired. And so you can tell she thinks a lot about those people. Yeah. And there was something about that was really touching to me and really relatable. I mean, my own life has made such a huge shift. I feel bad saying this in front of Dave, but I haven't written anything for the website in such a long time. And it's hard for me to imagine writing right now. It's still hard for me to imagine writing, right? And at the same time, like my big responsibility today at home has been making sure that all the cheerleaders at the kids' school have homecoming moms. And that feels sweet and tender and connected and like what I need. And so I realize I'm reading a lot into what she said, but for me, it just resonated in that way.
Well, it's very countercultural in what she said, because some would say that her star is rising so much that she can't, a football player.
Don't lose this opportunity.
What a stupid thing to do right now.
Anyone
right?
in sports is like, this isn't going to come again. You better maximize your potential. Yeah. That's the conventional wisdom. And she's saying, I want to one down it next year, have a not have to kind of be continually improving. RJ, what's as someone who just had the largest service of all time and
is embarking on a master planning process and a potential capital campaign a year from now. And
why don't you say something that will alienate all of your donors?
I'll have two children in college at the same time next year, and my wife has started a new business, and I guess. Well, I had a funny interaction with a really wonderful guy in my church recently, where my wife and middle son are going to be out of town this weekend. And so I said, hey, do you have time for tennis? And he said, well, I have a doubles match at that time. He said, but hey, what times are good for you? And I said, actually, I don't have any good times. I don't have any good regular times. But I said, but I should work on that this year. And he wrote back, he said, yes. He's like, I think a standing weekly tennis match with me is a good goal for 2023. And I agree with it. It's such a lovely thing to say.
So sweet, yeah.
But there's no way. Yeah. I just don't think I could give myself
That's great,
permission.
And also I can't. Yeah.
To do that. I wish that I could. And I will say another thing. We found out today. We went to Jamie and I went to this wonderful Presbyterian church in college called First Pres, Berkeley, California, which really is a great church. And we have 3 college friends who became Presbyterian pastors.
Oh my God.
The third of them, all 3 now have left the ministry. Yeah. Whoa. 2 went into sort of nonprofit Christian work, that's fine. That's adjacent, pastoring adjacent. And one started working for a local school as kind of their tech consultant. Mm-hmm. And it was just striking. It was just like and these are great, wonderful gospel preaching guys. And I don't really know why. I don't know the full backstory behind all of those. And maybe that was a great thing. But it drives home that it's a hard line of work to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess for those of you who are pastors listening, just like it's hard, and I want to acknowledge that. And for those of you who know pastors or worship with pastors. Like, no. I mean, it's hard out there for everybody, but it's a demanding line of work, and you wear a lot of hats, and it's been a hard time. And anyway, so I love that she said, I'm gonna, one down myself this next year. I would love to be able to say that at some year in the near future, but my head might explode. That's right, exactly. Sabbatical 2020.
Also, RJ, how about a monthly tennis appointment? Like,
let's start small.
I
RJ.
don't mean
that's
the
right.
therapeutic
Weekly is ambitious.
Yeah. I was sharing my resolutions with someone because for years, especially with Mockingbird and kind of our aversion to the law and
we're
discipline.
Very nihilistic.
We've had a sort of like no resolutions are the worst and everything, and they tend to illustrate the lack of willpower that people actually have over the long haul and our inability to change ourselves, yada, yada, yada. But I've noticed a bunch of people that are sort of involved, it sort of circle our ministry, that it kind of have re-embraced them from a place of like realistic expectation, but sort of like, hey, it'd be nice to have the freedom to actually engage with this again, which I take as a sign of maturity. But I have an actual resolution, and it's not meant to be a funny resolution, but I realized when I said it the other day, it maybe fit into that category. But part of the work of here we are having I guess dumped on therapy a little bit last year, but like part of my therapy has been uncovering just how frightened I am of disappointing people, of disappointing supervisors and bosses and parents and spouses and children and just myself and everyone and the actual God. The actual resolution is I wanted to disappoint people more in 2023. And so to that end, like I've actually taken some active steps. I canceled 4 stops on the book tour that I had taken on, which would have been fun, and I would have loved to see the people. But
good for you, Dave.
I'm going to cancel these, and just because it also means I can disappoint someone too. So I'm like excited about that. Good. And just trying to. I've talked to my supervisor here at the church, wonderful Paul Walker, about adjusting my job description so that I can basically disappoint him a little bit, and that's my, it's sort of a bit like taking one downing it, and for me, in fact, it's much harder to do that than to try to continue to achieve and believe and to crush it or something like that. Spiritually and emotionally and just personally, it is a harder thing to, there's no benefit to me outside of like, there's no sort of career benefit. There's only a personal benefit of having a little bit more space, a little bit more bandwidth. But yeah, I
which
look forward
is huge. You're just like a personal benit, but yeah, like huge to have a personal.
So this is the final
massive
episode of the Mockingcast.
Yeah,
it's been great. But
I just am excited to disappoint the two of you. So you'll love this resolution until it actually until I'm like, RJ, I can't talk to you. I'm so sorry. I just don't want to.
I will say this is not exactly click. This is not a resolution, but I will say I connected with a therapist yesterday. For the first time in a while, which is good. Really I needed to do that.
See, we like therapy, y'all.
We do like therapy.
Well, let's get into the second the second item here, which is another resolution, New Year's related thing. I know we've talked about it briefly before, but it's the meaning of dry January. We are in dry January. And the New York, the Atlantic, Caroline Mims Nice interviewed a philosopher named Edward Slingerland, who's the author of Drunk, How We Sipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way to Civilization. And one of the things she mentions, which is in relation to an article in Wired, is that apparently 1/5 of the population is doing dry January this year.
What?
Whoa. It's all over the internet. Let me say it's
massive.
I'm doing it. Josh is doing it.
I thought maybe the internet was just speaking to me personally.
I guess we're in the trend. I
was taking it very personally.
Well, 1/5 is a lot of people. Now this I think we traced the history of dry January a few years ago, but it started in England. And she's sort of interested in sort of this is reflective of a relationship with alcohol, an American relationship with alcohol that needs readjusting. Mm-hmm. And so she asks the philosopher who thinks about this constantly, what's going on? He says, I think things like dry January are ways for people to try to reassert some kind of control, to reestablish some safety features. And the safety features around alcohol that he feels had been removed were when we distilled things and made them more powerful, and when, lots of people don't drink, they drink alone, and all those sorts of things. He says, I refer to alcohol as the king of intoxicants because it's far and away the dominant intoxicant that's used across the world throughout history. And there's a good reason for that. It's very easy to dose. It has very predictable effects across individuals. It's easy to make. It goes well with food. There's a reason when you go to a restaurant, you're given a wine, not a cannabis list. Now, nice,
it's common.
She says, with the pandemic in particular, there's been a problem of overconsumption. But at the same time, there's also been a lot of loneliness. It almost feels like alcohol in moderation could help us with the latter, with loneliness. How do you think about the overcompensation problem versus the social benefits? He says, it's tricky. The pandemic was basically a natural experiment that you would never get human subject approval for. Let's see what happens if no one's allowed to leave their house, but they can order a case of tequila from their local taqueria. It was the extreme version of drinking in isolation, which was really unhealthy. People tried to keep using alcohol in a social way with things like Zoom cocktail hours, but that didn't work very well. In fact, there's a new study out by researchers, including the University of Pittsburgh's Michael Sayette, that in face-to-face social interactions, alcohol is very helpful. It relaxes people. It makes them far less self-conscious, makes them bond better. But they found that in online interaction, it actually has the reverse effect. It makes you more self-conscious. Then she asks, well, what do you do? He says, you mimic healthy cultures. Some cultures do have healthier drinking practices than others. Anthropologists refer to Northern versus Southern European drinking cultures. Northern drinking cultures tend to be binge drinkers. They tend to drink hard alcohol primarily, often in groups of men by themselves or women by themselves. Alcohol is forbidden to kids. It's kind of taboo, and the purpose of drinking is to get drunk. Southern European cultures, it's much more social. There's a frown on getting drunk, but people drink with their grandparents, etc. The French, Spanish. But then he says this, Sarah, and this is interesting for you and I in our current sort of role. Anglophone college culture is kind of the worst version of Northern drinking cultures.
Oh, man.
Because it's kids without fully developed prefrontal cortexes doing it, and they're drinking distilled liquors. If you want to design the unhealthiest drinking culture imaginable, it would be college drinking culture. I agree with that, by the way. I see that I remember being at the president of the University of Virginia here had called a bunch of ministers to talk about sort of the culture of what goes on at the university and how to help the kids spiritually. And there's a lot of talk about assault and sexual assault, and that was a real problem here, and other things. But there was an unwillingness to talk about binge drinking, which to me was inextricably linked and was the big elephant in the room. That
right.
No one wants assault, but
right.
What do we expect when people are drinking this much alcohol? I just don't.
Right.
And that's so seen as the glue that every tailgate revolves around. It's a massive cultural issue. And so Dry January to me is a sign of hope, a recalibration. I don't know if it has any chance of actually working over the long haul, but I don't know. Sarah, RJ, what do you think about this? Dry January.
Jamie and I have been talking about sort of drinking. And it reminds me, Jim Gaffigan said something like, the first time you have a drink, you're like, this is terrible. This doesn't even taste good. And then you get a little bit older in your 20s and stuff, and you're like, oh, this is very helpful to, ease my social interactions with people. This is kind of fun. And then you get older and you have kids and you have a job and you're tired all the time and you're like, this is the only thing that makes life worth living.
Yeah.
And I will not say I'm there. It's not the only thing that makes life worth living, but when you get home after a long day of work and you're not remotely done, you still have to cook dinner and do homework and put kids to bed. And, there is something about having a drink or two which makes all those things a little bit easier and more fun, Yeah. And I just think that's true, but it can very easily be a crutch you use to deal with the insanity of your life. And that's a little bit scary to be honest with you. So I've never done dry January, but like I said, it's been coming up in my social media feeds a lot. And I'm like, is Mark Zuckerberg trying to tell me something? But apparently it's a society-wide phenomenon, and I actually don't need to take it personally.
No.
I know a lot of priests who have been, like Erin Jean Ward has written a lot about,
she's a whole book. Yeah.
A whole thing on our relationship with alcohol, and especially in sort of an Episcopal Anglican context where we sort of pride ourselves on not being teetotalers.
Right.
There's a dark side.
I'm so sick.
And we need to be very careful.
Episcopal Church smug jokes about alcohol. It's like to me, it's like great. You know what? I've dealt with the fallout of alcoholism among sort of wealthy, privileged, waspy folks for years who have terrible taste in food but extremely refined taste in alcohol. And it's just like I'd much rather go to the Jewish Seder and eat a ton of food and have terrible wine. Like that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But that's hey, maybe that sounds self-hating there. Sarah, what I grew up with parents that don't really drink, and I realize as I get older that's very unusual.
Yeah,
especially a father who would have a glass of wine every once in a while, but was not a beer drinker, and that just wasn't a part of our lexicon. But Sarah, what do you think about this?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't grow up with parents who drink either. So, my dad didn't even take communion wine. And then my mother, I didn't see a bottle of wine in our house till I had gone to college. Drinking, like I didn't ever think of it as like a fundamentally normal thing that people do every day. And, Josh and I have very different backgrounds, right? Because I have this like super Southern Baptist, also lots of alcoholics family, and he has his own alcoholism, right, by way of Ireland, and then his family owned the last independent whiskey distillery in the country.
Oh wow.
So we, even newly married, very different cultures around alcohol, and so it's something we have talked about our whole marriage. And I actually think that's really healthy. I think married couples, because alcohol can be such a huge part of our culture, especially if you're in church work in the Episcopal Church, it's such a huge part of our culture. And so how do we navigate it? How do we do it without judgment, but also like, how do we make good choices for ourselves is a thing that we talk about a lot. And, we decided to do dry January. We've done it in previous years.
How's it worked?
I mean, I love it, honestly, because the thing, RJ, I thought you were about to say that I think is really true is while we know, yes, and this article says that alcohol affects people in different ways, or alcohol affects people generally in the same way, I would say that some of us it affects more than others. And I'm the kind of person that if I have a glass of wine the night before, like I'm talking like a 4 to 5 ounce glass of wine the night before, I will feel very fuzzy the next day.
Wow.
And I won't even realize it. And that has been the bizarre thing about sort of drinking culture now is because I didn't grow up with adults who had a glass of wine every day. And so sometimes when I take these long breaks, I do have an overwhelming feeling of, have I just been walking around fuzzy for the past 11 months? Because I feel very clear right now. And so that's real. I mean, we have to say these things.
Yes.
So yeah, alcohol is like the one drug we all decided is okay. I say that I love mezcal. I love wine. I have these things in my house. Like I will go back and have, I'm sure, a drink in February, but it's the one drug we've all decided is okay. So yeah.
And going to a liquor store is just, it struck me, it's so weird. There are so many varieties of a single drug. It's just like the way
I've never
we
thought about that, RJ.
fetishize it.
Yeah.
And all the different levels and costs. And it's a really weird thing.
I don't think I ever told you guys, but the year after I graduated from college, I actually worked for a think tank in Washington that was funded by the alcohol industry. And it was funded by like Brown-Forman and Bacardi and these huge, and we were sort of, it was like trying to put out intellectual like position papers about moderation and all this stuff. And it was pro drinking, but pro moderation, it was, and it's so interesting to me how much, I had no idea how much money that like Budweiser, for example, made, and that the biggest brand recognition in the entire world is Johnny Walker. Like that's over Nike.
Over McDonald's.
Over McDonald's is the highest. I mean, that's what I was told during that time. And by the way, there was plenty of really nice people that I worked with during that time.
Totally.
And, but then you go out of it and you're like, wait a second, why have we all decided that one is okay? Especially once you have, deal with people who've got real addiction and for whom alcohol is simply a destroyer. So I'm a person that I drink occasionally and very rarely, but I find that the dry January thing, it has been interesting. My wife's always telling me about it. There's the non-alcoholic sort of mocktail space has become very active. Like Katy Perry's started her own.
I've almost ordered her thing over and over again.
But it's like a very thing. And in this article, they actually talk about how Gen Z has gotten much more into marijuana and then psilocybin, to microdosing and stuff like that. And this guy in the interview is like, well, it's never actually going to take on. It's just too culturally entrenched alcohol. You just think of all of French cuisine ever. That's just not going to be overturned anytime.
Which is so beautiful, right? I mean, that's the other thing is like the pairing of wine with food or beer with food or liquor with food can be such a beautiful. I mean, when I pull out a bottle of mezcal and I'm very careful about I'm not buying none of this George Clooney nonsense. I want to know like the little farm it came from and that there are farmers that grow agave. Like that is beautiful to me. So it's, it's all
also,
there.
It's also indicative.
It's certainly time tested.
It
goes back a long time.
But
it's like the hymnal.
Its popularity attests to the fact that life is hard and it's full of pain and people,
it is.
People want to take the edge off and a little relief. And so you want to sort of, as a pastor or a pastorally oriented person, you want to be like, you don't want to blame people for wanting to to also be able to connect, and that you see people who are so uptight and anxious and finally being able to talk. And this guy's book basically says that without alcohol, lots of social progress would have never happened. And the church,
totally
it has a wine at the center. So like,
so yesterday I had my first lunch back with my students, and one of them was talking about, I mean, they take these incredible history classes, and one of them was talking about, there was some big questions class, and the question was basically like, how do you get people to care? Like how do you get people to care about war? How do you get people to care about poverty or whatever? And so they're all talking, and then finally, one of the other students is like, well, what was the solution? What did you guys come up with? And they were like, oh, and I was like, suffering. Suffering is how you get people to care. Like it's just, there's something, I mean, we're all sufferers, and this is an easy, inexpensive, readily available way to cope with it sometimes. And that's real.
And it is fascinating to see that. The science says that the social benefits of alcohol not only don't exist when you're drinking alone, they backfire. And so you have people during the pandemic already cope. The very thing that they're using to cope is making the problem worse. And that's, I think we've seen a lot of that. And people who are in people work or church work or therapists, like it didn't just not help. It made things a lot worse. And so the combination of like anger and alcohol. Usually when I've been dealing in the past with people who are supremely angry, at either blowing up at you at church or online or terrible things, look for the alcohol. And just before you try to engage them on any other level, you need to see if that's just a tip from 43 years of living. This next item is from Freddie DeBoer, who we've talked about before. He's this very interesting kind of a commentator online, and he wrote something called "The Creative Underclass is Still Raging." He's right. The internet famously is full of negative emotion, and there are all kinds of angry people on it. You have conservative anger over an evolving culture, liberal angst over the continued salience of reactionary populism, leftist fury over our inability to make anything happen. You have impossibly defensive stans taking to the digital ramparts to defend their favorite pop singers, and you have the wails of those whose favorite art forms are dying. You have angry conspiracy theorists and angry fact checkers and angry gamers and angry Redditors and angry feminists and angry libertarians and angry anarcho-primitivists and angry guys
That's me.
and angry guys with podcasts who are under the misapprehension that they're funny.
That's y'all.
When it comes to anger online, our cup overfloweth. He says, I have no possible way to be scientific about what I'm going to lay out to you, but I think that in the cacophony of constant online anger, there's a kind of person that plays an outsized role in the tenor of ugliness and resentment that permeates our online life. And it looks more or less like the creative underclass. I'm talking about people, almost always college educated, most gainfully employed, who have unrealized dreams in creative industries like movies, novels, journalism, music. They have positions in the world that are, by international comparison, quite comfortable, and yet they're angry all the time because of thwarted ambition and the sense that they were meant for more than comfort. Sometimes these people have actually tried and failed in various creative endeavors, but my sense is that many of them have never actually made an honest try at a creative field. Perhaps too embarrassed to dream big and fail. They're nevertheless possessed of a deeply ingrained cultural expectation that they're supposed to desire more than middle-class stability and the fruits of contemporary first-world abundance. These people look out at the world filled with creators creating, look at the considerable benefits they accrue, and they want. They want what others have, and want breeds resentment, especially when it's so plain that some of the people who have succeeded have done so despite no clear advantage in talent, worth, or effort. And they have ample laptop and phone time, so much laptop and phone time, and are perpetually bored. It's all a recipe for an entire class of people who spend their time taking out the resentment engendered by unfulfilled creative dreams on anyone who they see as an undeserving success. Ultimately, I think all we can do is further commit to a project we should be engaged in anyway. Shattering the myth of just desserts. Reminding people that they don't control their own destinies. Insisting on the truth that chance and path dependence play huge roles in our lives. Giving no ground to the myth of the self-made man. I believe I'm very good at what I do, but I'm exquisitely aware that if a few things had broken differently for me, I never would have enjoyed the opportunity to write as my only job. I wish there was a good way to drain the internet of all its envy and resentment. Until we find one, all we can do is remind people that what you do for a living is not a referendum on your value. We can and must achieve a world where everyone has food, shelter, clothing, but we can never achieve one where everyone enjoys public acclaim. And you have to find a way to deal with that. You wanted more, and you got less, and it hurts. There's an article for you guys.
Feels a little judgy, maybe. I'm like, says the guy who feels pretty good about himself. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting.
I think he's trying to wrestle with the fact that there is so much, and I cut out a lot of the article where there's more caveats. But
is he talking about himself though at all?
Yes.
Is he talking about a time? Does he talk about a time when he was similarly angry before he achieved glorious notoriety?
Yes, he does. But how do we account for the enormous amounts of rage that we uncover? He says basically, rage is a constant across all corners of the internet.
I was just when he says the thing about like if you drain the internet of like rage and envy, and it's like, okay, so like I guess Mockingbird and J. Crew still have websites. Like I'm just like, what does that look like?
Made well, Sarah.
They better. They're doing the work of the Lord out there. Okay. Yeah. No, I just I mean, I hear him. Yes, everything he's saying is yeah, there's a lot of rage out there, but you know, we all seem to carry a tremendous amount of it ourselves. And thank God I'm Christian. I don't, because for me, right, like I learn over and over again that I didn't earn my rage either, like and I've actually been given the promise of hope in place of it. And so my rage actually doesn't belong to me. And I think I used to have a lot more rage. I mean, when I was younger, probably before I experienced such great tragedy, it's hard for me to get as angry as I used to now. So, yeah, I mean, it does make me so there's this one thought I'm having, and you can cut this out because this is like the Southern history moment no one asked for. But when the Civil War was being fought and plantation owners who had enslaved people wanted, people across the South to fight on behalf of the Confederacy, they basically made the idea of having slaves aspirational for poor whites. And that's how they got them to fight. Like, well, someday, which was never going to happen. And then a ton of them died in the Civil War. And, there's a little bit of crossover for me there that it's like, it was like borrowed rage that got them to fight, and then it killed them, and I do think, I don't even know if the rage is ours, because I think we borrow rage. I mean, I think a lot of us lead lives of incredible numbness now. We find ways to numb ourselves. And I think there's alcohol, but I think there's nothing more numbing than a scroll screen. You know what I mean? Than like scrolling through a screen. I think there's nothing more numbing. And I think if we do that enough, and I speak for myself, if I do that enough, there becomes a point at which I feel like I need to feel something. And rage is the easiest way to feel something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes total sense to me that all these things are correlated.
Yeah.
The one thing he says I completely agree with is that not all anger, but a large portion of anger is undealt with pain. Something that hurts, something you're mourning, and you just can't, you don't want to, and you can't sit in the pain and deal with the pain. And so that becomes
rage,
a combination of fear and anger. So I think that's just empirically true.
Totally.
Yeah, I think
like 90%, I would think, Yeah,
I mean, some of these people are angry because they've been treated very, very, very badly, and they're justifiably angry, and that can happen. And but even then, it's still pain, and it's much easier to get angry than to say, this hurts so badly, and I just need to go to bed for like a week. Well,
I think what what's interesting is to isolate this creative class of basically sort of like desk drawer novelists, and say you have a job where you have to be, it's a quote unquote email job where you're just answering emails all the time, and most of the day you're also spending looking at in other tabs at basically other people's lives. You're consuming content. They're the influencer thing, and you're there's a real proximity to all of these people that you feel like you could almost be. And so your life becomes this rage about the life you're not leading, or that it's the unfairness. And I think there's something true about that. I think it applies to other. It contributes to the. If you are at a computer all day and you are constantly being exposed to people who's achieved dreams that you didn't, or you're angry at yourself for not even trying, well, then you also have an outlet for venting that rage that you think is sort of feels good, but it actually does affect this cloud out there that affects us all. But then, because I think other people are angry too about they not getting what they feel they deserve. I always feel like the way you can make people most angry, and the way that Jesus made people angry, frankly, when the religious leaders, when the Pharisees got so mad, it was because they felt that he was taking away what they felt they deserved, righteousness-wise. They'd been working so hard to be good and to get some sort of standing or status, and anytime you debunk or you mess with the ladder of deserving that is sort of a mechanism of control in people's lives, they get extremely angry. I've noticed this. If you take away something that someone feels that they've earned, or you refuse to give them something that or you get something you haven't earned, nothing is more enraging. It's this relationship with deserving that I think is interesting that he brings it to, because as grace, if we're talking about grace in its absence, this sort of anger is directly related to is kind of like very much related to grace and its absence.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's like my favorite sin I commit, when I have that moment. I mean, I had it yesterday when I was standing in line somewhere where I am like, but I deserve better treatment than this. I'm just like, well, I'll be bam, like it's just like literally, but it just like, it's such a funny, like when you have that feeling, it's such a very it can be a daily feeling. But the thing I keep thinking of, I was thinking, what is this making me think of? And when we're talking about Jesus, we should talk about all the holy figures. Beyonce had a song that came out a few months ago that was everywhere. I don't think of you two as fans, but I'm sure you heard the song "You Won't Break My Soul." And there were so many videos people did where they would use the lyrics where she says, "Now I just fell in love and I just quit my job. I'm going to find new drive. Damn, they work me so hard. Work by 9, then off past 5. And then they work my nerves. That's why I can't sleep at night." And I mean, it was everywhere for a minute. And it was so deeply relatable for people. And so I think RJ's response initially was really good, because I think we have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves, right? And being these sort of, what am I if not like a mid-level person that like has to answer emails a lot and like open drawers on a desk? I do kind of feel like that a lot in my job. And I think a lot of us are in that boat, and I think rage is pretty tempting. So
he wants people to try to be more honest. It's fine to be angry, but to pretend that you're angry about such and such an issue when you're really just angry about your life.
Right.
And
that's
that
good.
is
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, and I can't help but think about it a little bit in terms of church folks, and I see that there are people that make a huge, very negative racket online in church circles or ministry circles, and then you kind of come to find out what they're doing, and they're bored. Like they're mad that their church isn't working really, and so then they're taking it out on the R.J. Haymans of the world, who you see that guy online, and you're like,
just one glorious story after another.
Screw that guy.
Yes,
I hate that guy. Not that
we found our title. Like, screw that guy. I hate that guy. In parentheses, RJ. Okay.
Well, I do want to say that what I have found is that something that's very effective with angry people is to tell them to relax a little bit. That works
every
wonders.
time.
Just chill out, dude. Guaranteed homicide.
Guaranteed homicide.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and that guy is always he's got a lot to say. So, and maybe the article itself is an example of what he's talking about.
He might be speaking to himself a little. I hope he.
Well,
is.
we're gonna move into a different area, but that also relates to some of what we're talking about. This just came out on Christmas Eve, actually, by Molly Worthen in the New York Times. She asked, "How would you prove that God performed a miracle?" It's a great long read, and she profiles some folks who have sort of made it their business to kind of look into miracles and confirm them and investigate. But sort of midway through, she gets to this huge split between sort of Western, or at least Northwestern Christianity and European Christianity, that's sort of the developing world Christianity. And this is what she says. She says, scholars estimate that 80% of new Christians in Nepal come to faith through an experience with healing or deliverance from demonic spirits. Perhaps as many as 90% of new converts who join a house church in China credit their conversion to faith healing. In Kenya, 71% of Christians say they have witnessed a divine healing, according to a 2006 study. Even in the relatively skeptical United States, 29% of survey respondents claim they have seen one. You can quarrel with the exact figures, but we are talking about millions of people who say something otherworldly happened to them. Yet most secular people, even many religious believers, are oblivious to this or shrug off miracle stories on principle as motivated reasoning, hallucination, or fraud. Then she talks about a guy named Ifanyi Chinadozi. When Ifanyi Chinadozi came to the United States for college in 2009, he was, quote, shocked as a young man from Nigeria at the discomfort in talking about spiritual experiences and marvelous things that happen as part of routine Christian discourse in Nigeria and across the world. Dr. Chinadozi went to medical school at Tufts University and is completing his residency in general surgery at the University of Maryland. He also leads a ministry called Healing Vessels International, which brings both prayer and medical resources to people in need.
That's amazing.
He has been a healing evangelist since the age of 7, when he said Jesus appeared to him in a dream and asked if he would like to heal people. In 2007, when he was in high school, a family sought his help to raise their mother, who had been declared brain dead, at the hospital. He told me that he initially refused because he had tried and failed to raise someone from the dead before. Finally, he agreed to pray over a bottle of olive oil for them. I lifted it up and said, Father, let this represent me and be unto this girl and her family as their faith has demanded in the name of Jesus Christ. They didn't thank me, just rushed out, and I thought, I don't have to go with them and be embarrassed. Whatever happens, happens. He heard later that the woman's daughter poured the whole bottle onto her while praying, that the woman coughed and opened her eyes. The family gave a party to celebrate her recovery, where Dr. Chinadozi said he met her. Dr. Chinadozi told me that his family and friends address him as a man of God, but he stressed that the woman's recovery proved that he has no special powers, not even superhuman faith. He told me, people say God only works when you have faith. I don't think that's true. God sometimes overrides our unbelief and high-mindedness and proves himself to be God. He doesn't need our faith to be God. This article goes on.
It's like the best thing I've ever heard in my life.
Your sermon's done for this week, folks. I don't even know what the gospel is.
He says,
Sarah,
you're going
to... Yes.
Sarah's going to love this next part. She says, why are stories like this so much more common outside the West? Skeptics say that naturally people pray more often and overinterpret lucky breaks when they don't have antibiotics or doctors close by. Although
white people don't like spicy food.
Although the raising that Dr. Chinadozi described took place in a hospital. In the Bible, humans see wondrous signs of God's power where the gospel is spreading to new lands, and Jesus refuses to perform magic tricks for skeptical Pharisees, but heals those whose desperation drives them to faith. J. Ayodeji Adewuya is a professor of New Testament at the Pentecostal Theological Seminary in Tennessee. He saw his share of miracles in his home country of Nigeria, including, he believes, the raising of his stillborn infant son after he spent 20 minutes shouting and pacing the room in prayer. I joke, you don't really need to pray the Lord's Prayer, give us our daily bread, when you have everything provided by Walmart and your fridge is full. When you're in a place where you have nothing and the only thing you can do is depend on God, at that point you're expecting something. I'm going to keep going, but what do you make of this so far?
I'm on board, baby.
It's so good. I mean, I think... you know, I've had several instances in my life that have felt miraculous. So, like, I do not doubt the power of miracles at all. And I don't think that's because I'm special. And I don't think that's because I have a superhuman faith. I just think a lot of the times we just miss miracles. I think I've had a lot of miraculous things in my life. I think I've had a lot of miracles. I think I've missed a lot of miracles, too. You know what I mean? This is so powerful.
I'll say two things. It totally resonates with what this guy I used to work with, his name is Timothy Halls. He was a missionary for many, many years in Brazil. And he said when he was working in Brazil, the conversion stories were always like this. Like, I used to have cancer, and then Jesus healed me, and now I follow Jesus. Or I used to worship this other God, and then I met this guy, and I could tell that the God he worshipped was more powerful than the God that I worshipped. And I asked him what God that was, and he said Jesus, and now I worship Jesus. Like, it had nothing to do... and not that this isn't valid, but it had nothing to do with guilt and shame and forgiveness and redemption. It was just demonstrations of spiritual power. He said that's just the way it was. And I will say, on the other hand, I feel like there have been a few miracles in our midst recently here at church. Like one guy I know who couldn't get out of bed for a few weeks because he was struggling with vertigo. And then someone prayed for him and he seems to have been healed.
That's amazing.
You know, or a woman who dealt with... bipolar disorder for years and years and years and years and years. In the last few months, she seems to have been healed. And another person I know whose son struggles with mental illness and went missing. And they thought they knew where he was. And they drove to that town, which is a fairly big town. And they're like, we don't think we'll ever find him. They pull into a park and there he is. You know, like hungry and skinny and cold, but they took him home. These things do happen, you know?
And the elephant in the room is one that Worthen addresses in this remarkable article. She said, if God can heal, then why does he do it so rarely?
Why doesn't he?
The world is full of suffering people who pray with no relief. She talked to one expert who said, even people who believe in miracles often don't pray for them because they're afraid of disappointment. I've had people die on my watch. It's incredibly painful. You ask, is it my fault? This expert, Candy Brown, speculated that many Christians' belief that miraculous healing ceased after the New Testament times springs from, quote, protection against pain, protection against feeling ill will toward God or other people. It takes hope and vulnerability to be open to healing. For Christians, Worthen writes, it also takes spiritual maturity to remember that miracles are not the point. Miracles are signs meant to help humans see the greatest miracle of all, the incarnation and resurrection of Jesus Christ, God's ultimate intrusion into ordinary life, by which he will eventually wipe away all tears, according to the book of Revelation. I'm deeply interested in this because, I'm a person who, as RJ, you just said, like, I happen to really love talking about guilt and forgiveness and shame and all those things. But I do notice that when we, in our, especially our mainline tradition, talk about, like, why aren't people coming to church? Like, people are looking for God, and they're looking for this. They're looking for relief from their pain. Yes. They're looking for supernatural healing. And if that's not just completely off the table, or people thumb their noses at it, and she's saying millions and millions of people experience this, and yet Westerners we just thumb our noses at all of it. I always find, and it becomes uncomfortable because, like, we're supposed to, in a kind of a post multicultural world, we're supposed to really cede to the locals and sort of believe as people of color, and yet here we are not believing an enormous part of their experience. I find it to be it needs to be pointed out that that takes a lot of hubris and a lot of quote unquote colonialism to dismiss out of hand. I mean, I've always told people, I think that those, when you hear people say, oh, belief in God is just a crutch for poor people. I mean, I've heard college students and high school students say that to me, and you just want to say, well, maybe the crutch is actually all the money and wealth that is buffering us from our actual need for things. And that
or maybe you could use a crutch, because your life is a disaster.
Yes, if it's a crutch, sign me up.
Miserable.
I love crutches.
I love a crutch. Give me four. Right. I'll find a way to
give me a wheelbarrow. Put me in a wheelbarrow. Carry me. Yes. I want one of those things like in Wall-E, like where they just fill you up with soda all the time.
Yes, please. Unlimited Slurpees.
Yes. But you know what I mean. You want to say, like, maybe people are a little closer to the reality of the world and life who aren't surrounded by, all of this material stuff.
So I want to say, and I don't know when it happened exactly, but I completely relate to the whole thing of someone is sick or someone needs something and you're praying for them and what is it? You're scared to disappoint them. You're scared that God's not going to show up. And so you pray prayers like, Lord, if it be your will.
Whatever you say.
To accept
exactly. And at some point, I don't know when it is, I didn't completely stop doing that, but I sort of did stop. I don't know why. And I just started praying for whatever the person needed or wanted. And I don't know what to say. And I don't feel embarrassed about it anymore. I'm not as scared as I used to be that I'm gonna what is it that I'm gonna disappoint God, that my lack of faith is gonna be made evident, that my doubt is gonna be that I'm gonna look bad, that I'm gonna make God look bad. I don't make Jesus look bad.
We're so far away.
I guess
from
I've stopped
praying.
defending. I've stopped defending.
Right.
It's like God's going to do what God's going to do, and He just tells us to ask for what we want. And sometimes He does it, and sometimes He doesn't. But
what is Bono says? Stop helping God across the street like a little old lady. Like it's He doesn't need your help.
No.
I think that
we need His,
and people say, "Oh, well, this is such a strong ask." I mean, I don't think we're in any danger of praying with too much expectation. Like what do we have to lose at this point? Pray with faith. Talk to actually God, not just an idea about God. I think. I find, and by the way, this article, there's like 5 other stories that she tells of educated people from all sorts of backgrounds who are like, and then the tumor turned into scar tissue, and we don't know what to make of it. But it just the next day he was okay.
Well, and I have a couple of different things I want to say, but I do want to say it's not always just physical, right? Like I think about that bizarre airport experience Josh and I had where we're like defending this woman we don't even know. And like for me, that was like God using us in a miraculous way, right? And it was to protect her and to make her feel safe and to make these guys realize how sinful they were. And that was what was, that was a miracle. We got to be a part of that. That's what was happening, you know? And it turns out when God uses me in a miraculous way, he doesn't let me use the F word, which is crazy because I say it all the time. But it didn't come out of my mouth then when I really wanted it. But the other thing it makes me think of is this, like, this question, because it was so weird to have, you know, my college students who are just, they're so brilliant. They're at this incredible university. And to have them say, like, well, what made them care? And the answer was nothing. And it's like, well, suffering. And I wonder, I mean, I think we can fetishize people in impoverished, you know, economies because we can say, oh, well, they really know what it's like not to have anything. They really know what it's like to suffer. So that's why they believe in miracles. Right. And, I push against that because in my own life, there's been so much suffering and I have needed so much rescue, despite the fact that I have all the physical resources and I have health, praise God, right? I still know suffering so intimately now. And so I know the need to be cared for. And I think what we actually are afflicted with in this country, especially as Christians, is it's our MO to look like we're not suffering and to hide our suffering, especially Christians, right? Thus, we don't need anybody to care for us.
I don't need a miracle.
No, I don't need a miracle.
And that comparative suffering is just a absolute deep, dark, black hole, I think.
Yeah.
I agree. That's important to say. I mean, like, what is the Mary Carr says? The most privileged person in this room has suffered the torments of the damned, and like, totally. You scratch the surface and you find out that there is a way to distance yourself from. It's almost a form of self-medication. It's like an alcohol thing to anesthetize yourself from your needs, and that can last for a while. And material comfort can be one of those ways that's just not available to some people.
Right.
RJ, yeah.
I think it's a shame thing a little bit too. I think sometimes when well-resourced people are suffering, there's a shame, which I should be able to handle this.
Yeah. I mean,
I should be able to figure.
Don't they verbally caveat to you, like when they talk about pain in their lives? I mean, yeah.
I should be able to handle this. Like, what is wrong with me? I should be able to figure this out. Like, I should be happy. I should be able to handle this kind of pain. And
do you know what a first world problem is? Profound suicide. Yeah, like it's like that's also,
yes.
Oh my God.
And only when you acknowledge, like, I'm powerless against this, then maybe you make room for someone else to show up and help you out.
Yeah. I mean, we still want to.
You actually ask, like, I can't handle this. I'm sorry, I can't do this. Yeah. I'm not equal to this task. Save me.
Can I say one other thing? Because I took a note down, and I just want to give a shout out to Simeon Zoll, who said on the Brothers All podcast that that sometimes God heals us and works through psychiatric medicine, through psychiatry.
Yes.
And I think, I even think that miracles happen through psychiatry. So, when we live these lives where we're just missing the miracles, so.
Well, talk to any doctor, and if they're telling the truth, they'll be like, we don't know how this works. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how this works.
Yeah.
Covering myself. Well, that's a very hopeful note. And I thought another hopeful note would be to kind of take this sort of slightly different tack. That is the theologian Jim Nestigan, who was one of Gerhard Furti's students. He died last week, and he wrote this wonderful introduction to the Lutheran Catechism for Teenagers or something called Free to Be. And I always love this. This is a sort of a closing note addressing teenagers. It says, God has made a decision about you. He hasn't waited to find out how sincere you are, how devout or religious you might be. Now, this is, by the way, exactly what the Dr. Chinitobe was saying.
Totally.
He said, he hasn't waited for you to find out how sincere you are, or how devout or religious you might be, or how well you understand the Bible. He hasn't even waited to find out if you are interested or willing to take this decision seriously. He has simply decided. God made this decision knowing full well the kind of person you are. He knows you better than anyone else could, inside out, upside down, and backwards. He knows where you are strong and where you are weak, what you are most proud of and what you would most like to hide. Be that as it may, God's decision is made. He comes straight out with it. I am the Lord your God. This is the decision. God has decided to be your God. For God wants to be as close to you as your next breath, to be the one who gives you confidence and value, to open a future for you in the freedom of the Word. God wants to be the one to whom you turn for whatever you need. I think that's a beautiful sort of word that works in concert with this Holy Spirit, miracle ministry. And that sort of stands even when we are disappointed that God has not taken that thorn away or whatever it may be, or given us the career that we see online that other people have gotten that we feel we deserve. I don't know. Any closing thoughts?
Or need another drink. Yeah.
I just think we're all teenagers. If I've learned anything about working with people who just stop being teenagers, it's that we're all actually just teenagers. At our best, actually. I think we're dreamy and creative and trying to figure out who we are. And, I love that idea of God's embrace and God wanting us to turn to him in the midst of it.
We're all teenagers, though. Yeah. I mean, I'm dealing with a teenager right now and in the house. And
same, girl.
Am I really like that?
Yeah.
But maybe it's a picture. If I can love this impossible person through the temper tantrums and radical swings in mood, then maybe God can love me too. RJ, any closing thought from you?
Just encouraged. I'm encouraged to pray and to be honest about my disappointment.
There you go. Yeah. There's RJ's resolution for 2023. I love it. I won't make it into we won't hold you accountable, but we will make sure that Sarah stops with the Madewell already.
Yes,
we will.
Please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Cut up the credit cards.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for we'll talk.
Happy New Year.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye. The Madewell already.
Yes,
we will.
Please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Cut up the credit cards.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for we'll talk.
Happy New Year.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.